2 years before this night, the man at the console had been writing software for a living. A keyboard, a screen, a desk, deadlines. Nothing in that life suggested he would one day sit inside a shelter on the edge of Kyiv with his hands on the controls of the most expensive air defense system the United States has ever exported. It was the 4th of May, 2023. Sometime in the dark hours, a track came down out of the upper atmosphere toward the capital, and the radar picked it up, and the computer did what it was built to do. It measured the speed, it measured the trajectory, it measured the altitude, and it classified the thing as ballistic. Thought it was an Iskander, they said so afterward, plainly without embarrassment. By that point in the war, Iskanders were routine. 14 months of them. A steep, fast, arcing track on a screen was not a mystery, it was a Tuesday. So they engaged it the way they had been taught to engage it 8 weeks earlier in Oklahoma. And the interceptors came off the launcher, and the track ended. Then they went and looked at what fell. The fragments were recovered and laid out and examined, and they were not from an Iskander. They were from a Kyiv 47 M2, a Kinzhal. The weapon that Vladimir Putin had stood in front of a giant screen in Moscow 5 years earlier and introduced to the world as un-interceptable. One of 6 new systems, he said, that would make Western missile defense obsolete. The animation showed it slicing through the sky at 10 times the speed of sound. The word attached to it in every press release and every broadcast was hypersonic, and the promise attached to that word was simple. Nothing you have can touch it. A former programmer, roughly 10 weeks into his career as an air defense operator, had just touched it. There is a detail in the wreckage that matters, and I want you to hold on to it because we are coming back to it at the end. The soot on the Warhead casing was black. On an earlier Kinzhal wreck from 2022, the soot had been white. The difference is not decoration. It is evidence, and it tells you something about how the missile died. So here's the question this video answers. Was the unstoppable weapon ever actually unstoppable? And then the harder question, the one almost nobody asks because it arrived 2 years later when the cameras had moved on. What happened when Russia's engineers got a second turn? Start with the reputation because both of the reputations in this fight were oversold, and one of them was oversold by the United States. On the 1st of March 2018, Putin delivered an address to Russia's Federal Assembly that was less a speech than a product launch. 6 weapons. A nuclear-powered cruise missile, a nuclear torpedo, a glide vehicle, and an air-launched missile called Kinzhal, which is Russian for dagger, presented with computer animation of a fighter releasing it, and the missile burning down toward a target that had no answer for it. The pitch was aimed at exactly one audience. For 30 years, American missile defense had been the thing that made American power difficult to deter. Patriot batteries in Korea, in the Gulf, in Europe. Aegis at sea. The whole architecture rested on an assumption that incoming missiles fly predictable arcs, and that a fast enough interceptor can meet them. The word hypersonic was chosen because it attacks that assumption at the root. A true hypersonic glide vehicle does not fly a predictable arc. It skips, it maneuvers, it refuses to tell your radar where it is going. Against that, the entire defensive architecture is scrap metal, which is why the label mattered more than the missile. And is why analysts started pulling at it almost immediately. Because when you look at what the Kinzhal actually is, you find something considerably less exotic than the animation suggested. Analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies and at the War Zone assess it as an air-launched adaptation of the 9K-720 Iskander M, a ground-launched ballistic missile that had already been in Russian service for years. The innovation is not the missile. The innovation is the airplane. Bolt it under the belly of a modified MiG-31, a fast high-flying interceptor, and release it at altitude, and you have given a battlefield ballistic missile a running start. More range, more speed. Same fundamental flight path. NATO's own classification in 2020 called it an air-launched ballistic missile, and noted it is not generally characterized as a hypersonic weapon. The Center for Strategic and International Studies put it more bluntly, observing that nearly all ballistic missiles reach hypersonic speeds at some point in flight, which makes the label technically true and analytically meaningless. And in 2023 and 2024, Chinese military journals evaluating a weapon their own government has no reason to talk down describe the Kinzhal as based on 1980s technology, conditionally hypersonic at best, and seriously lacking the ability to maneuver laterally. That last phrase is the whole fight in 7 words. Speed alone does not defeat a modern interceptor. Unpredictability does. And a missile that goes very fast in a straight line is, from the perspective of a fire control computer, a well-behaved problem. But nobody had proved that. It had never been shot at. Every figure in this video was read off a printed document, and the document is named. The book is built the same way. 30 Allied weapons. Armor, anti-tank, artillery, machine guns. 182 pages, 3 editions, and every plate reproduced from the manual that issued it. Then the part no other reference prints. What each one cost to build. Contract prices, man-hours per gun, factory output by year. 4 entries carry no cost figure at all, and each of those says why, rather than guess. The plate archive comes with it, and every future revision free. And if you would rather not spend anything, there is a second book. 20 rifles, complete and free. Both links are in the description and the pinned comment. To understand why the 4th of May went the way it did, you have to understand what a Patriot battery actually is, because most people picture a launcher and stop there. The launcher is the least interesting part. A battery is a network. At the center is a single phased array radar in a trailer, the AN/MP-65 in the current version, which does 3 jobs that older systems needed 3 separate radars for. It searches, it tracks, it guides the interceptors. It can hold more than 100 targets at once, out past 100 kilometers. Behind it sits the engagement control station, which is a metal box containing 3 people and the decision. Around them, generators, because a radar of that size eats power the way a small town does. And then the M903 launchers, parked out where the missiles can fly. Here is the part that matters against a ballistic target. In automatic mode, the computer can classify a track by speed, trajectory, and altitude, and fire without waiting for a human to agree. Against an aircraft, you would never want that. Against something falling out of the sky at several kilometers per second, the seconds you spend confirming are the seconds you do not have. Doctrine typically puts 2 interceptors on each target, because you do not get a second attempt. And the interceptor itself is the quiet revolution. The older PAC-2 family is a large missile with a blast fragmentation warhead that detonates near the target and hopes the fragments do the rest. The PAC-3 is something else entirely. It is smaller, and it carries no meaningful explosive warhead at all. It kills by hitting. Hit to kill in the trade. It steers with 180 small attitude control thrusters ringed around its nose, and a K-band active radar seeker that switches on in the endgame and drives the missile into the target body. The energy of the collision does the work. That design decision has 2 consequences. The first is that a PAC-3 is small enough that a launcher holds 16 of the earlier version, or 12 of the current top-end model where it would hold 4 PAC-2s. The second is that hit-to-kill demands accuracy measured in centimeters against something moving at hypersonic speed, which is an engineering problem that sounds impossible right up until somebody solves it. The version that matters here is the PAC-3 MSE, the missile segment enhancement. Bigger dual-pulse rocket motor, bigger fins, upgraded actuators, roughly 50% more reach, out past 50 kilometers. And now the crux of the entire duel, which is a physics argument, not a patriotism argument. The Kinzhals advertise top speed as around Mach 10, but it is only there briefly at altitude in thin air. To hit a target on the ground, it has to come down through the dense lower atmosphere, and when it does, it slows sharply. Russian sources themselves put it around Mach 4 shortly after launch. Somewhere in that descent, the fastest missile in the world becomes a very fast ballistic problem, and a very fast ballistic problem is precisely what the PAC-3 was designed against. The crews who would test that theory had been on the system for a matter of weeks. Patriot training normally runs about 6 months and roughly a year to full proficiency. The Pentagon compressed it into 10 weeks at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, for around 65 Ukrainian soldiers. They started in January 2023 and graduated in March, training at least 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, according to Voice of America. The first systems reached Ukraine in April. 6 weeks later, they made history and then spent 2 days arguing about whether they had. The disclosure of the 4th of May intercept was a mess, and the mess is worth telling because it is the opposite of how a propaganda victory gets announced. On the night itself, Kyiv reported all targets destroyed and said nothing about a ballistic kill. On the 5th, the Ukrainian outlet Defense Express looked at the debris and concluded a Kinzhal had come down, a claim that Air Force spokesman Yuri Inat initially disputed. Only on the 6th did Air Force Commander Lieutenant General Mykola Oleszczuk confirm it on Telegram, saying that yes, they had shot down the unique Kinzhal, and that it happened during the night attack of the 4th of May in the skies of the Kyiv region. Then Washington. Brigadier General Patrick Ryder, the Pentagon press secretary, confirmed that Ukrainian forces had downed a Russian missile using the Patriot system. Analysts noted the intercept may have been made by an older PAC-3 variant rather than the newest one, which, if anything, sharpens the point. And Defense Express added the detail that made missile defense people sit up. Based on where the debris fell, the engagement appears to have happened in mid-course, with the missile passing at high speed and high altitude. That is the phase where a genuinely hypersonic weapon is supposed to be untouchable. The operator himself surfaced 2 years later in a Ukrainian Air Force video released on the 4th of May, 2025, identified only as Dmitro. His line was better than anything a scriptwriter would have handed him. He said he never imagined that a regular programmer like him would end up operating a Patriot system and shooting down the world's first Kinzhal. 12 days after the first kill, Russia tried to prove the first kill was a fluke. Early on the 16th of May, 2023, Kyiv absorbed a layered strike designed to saturate exactly one battery. According to Ukraine's commander-in-chief at the time, General Valery Zaluzhny, 18 missiles came at the capital, 6 Kinzhals released by 6 MiG-31s, 9 Caliber cruise missiles from the sea, 3 more ground-launched ballistic missiles, drones underneath all of it, different speeds, different altitudes, different arrival times, all converging on one city. Zaluzhny reported that all of them were intercepted. President Zelensky told the Council of Europe the number was 100%. The crews of the 96th Anti-Aircraft Missile Brigade fought that engagement in what their commander, Colonel Serhiy Yeremenko, calls Sign Granite, described as machine gun mode. More than 30 interceptors fired in a handful of minutes. A Wall Street Journal reconstruction described the radar catching the 6 inbound Kinzhals at roughly 125 miles out, and the last one dying at about 9 miles, seconds from impact. Do the math on that. 9 miles against something still traveling at several times the speed of sound is a fraction of a second of margin. That is the whole story of hit to kill compressed into one number. And then the information war started, which in this war arrives faster than the debris hits the ground. Russia's defense ministry, through the state agency TASS, announced that a Kinzhal high-precision strike had hit a Patriot. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu went further, claiming a Kinzhal had completely destroyed a Patriot radar and 5 launchers, and that Ukraine was inflating its intercept counts. Ignat, for Ukraine, responded with a line that told you everything and confirmed nothing. Do not worry about the fate of the Patriot. 2 claims, both from interested parties, pointing in opposite directions. This is where a channel either picks a flag or does the work. The answer came from the Americans, and it landed in the middle, which is usually where answers live. CNN, citing a U.S. official, reported that 2 components had been damaged, a battery generator and part of the electronics, but that the system was never offline. On the 18th of May, Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh confirmed on the record that one Patriot system had been damaged, that it had been fixed, and that it was fully back and operational, with the United States providing some assistance on the repair remotely. So Shoigu's 5 launchers and a radar were not 5 launchers and a radar. They were a generator and some electronics, repaired over a video call. But Ignat's breezy dismissal was not the whole truth either. Something did get through close enough to hurt the battery. The honest version is the boring one in between, and it is the only version supported by evidence from a party with no stake in the scoreboard. If you are the kind of viewer who would rather have the boring true number than the exciting false one, subscribe. That middle ground is the entire editorial policy here. Now back to the wreckage, because the wreckage is the reason this episode exists at all. On the 12th of May, 2023, Iskander Ruvin, director of the Kyiv Scientific Research Institute of Forensic Expertise, publicly displayed the recovered components, photographed for Reuters by Valentin Ogirenko. Open-source analyst at Ukraine Weapons Tracker identified the 5th of May wreckage as the unitary warhead assembly, common to both the Kinzhal and the Iskander. Ukrainian forensic work on the filler found an octane-based explosive, the same compound used in the Iskander's warhead, roughly 150 kilograms of it, equivalent to something like 240 kilograms of TNT. which independently confirms the analyst's claim about the missile's parentage. The Dagger and the Iskander share a warhead. And then the soot. Analysis published by EuroSD noted that the 2023 warhead casing carried black soot, where a 2022 Kinzhal wreck had carried white. The reading is that a hit-to-kill impact injected enough energy into an otherwise insensitive explosive filler to burn it dirty. The interceptor did not just knock the missile down, it reached inside it. That is the high watermark. From there, the story runs uphill for a year and then turns hard. Ukrainian officials claimed a clean sheet over the capital for more than a year. Colonel Yarmolenko told Ukrinform in remarks published on the 4th of July 2024 that more than 20 Kinzhals had been aimed at Kyiv and all of them had been intercepted, and that not a single ballistic target had reached the capital since early May 2023. Earlier on the 31st of December 2023, Ignat had given a specific running figure, 15 Kinzhals downed since the 4th of May, with the count starting from that moment. Both of those are Ukrainian government figures from officials with an obvious interest in the number being high, and they should be read as dated snapshots rather than audited totals. And even inside that window, the sheet was not perfectly clean. On the 27th of June 2024, one of 6 missiles fired at the capital, a Kinzhal, was not intercepted. Yes, I know what the informed viewer is already typing. A Kinzhal aimed at Kyiv, where the densest Patriot coverage in the country sits, is not the same test as a Kinzhal aimed at a city with no Patriot at all. That is not a loophole in the story. That is the story. And Ignat said it out loud himself when he noted that Patriot's engagement radius against ballistic targets is only about 25 kilometers. Kyiv is defended does not mean Ukraine is defended, and then Russia's engineers came back. Before the reversal, though, we have to deal with the older lie because you cannot honestly credit the Patriot for 2023 without discrediting what was claimed for it in 1991. During Desert Storm, the Patriot became the first celebrity weapon of the cable news era. President George H.W. Bush and the U.S. Army described near perfection against Iraqi Scuds, a figure around 96%, 45 intercepts out of 47 engagements. The footage of the streaks in the night sky over Riyadh and Tel Aviv ran on a loop, and a generation learned that American missile defense worked. Then a physicist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology named Theodore Postel, working with George Lewis, went through the same television footage frame by frame and reached a conclusion that did not fit on a Chiron. Writing in Science and Global Security in 1992 and testifying to the House Government Operations Committee on the 7th of April that year, Postel argued the video contained no unambiguous evidence that Patriot destroyed even one Scud warhead. Across 28 engagements, not one confirmed warhead kill. Patriots, he found, were frequently missing by hundreds of meters, and the fireballs that looked like victories were often the interceptor, detonating near a tumbling missile body while the warhead continued to the ground. A congressional review associated with Joseph Cirincione concluded that the best available evidence supported somewhere between 0 and 4 warhead kills. Under pressure, the Army walked its own claim down from 96% to around 61%, and cut its warhead kill count from 45 to 24. Postel was attacked ferociously by the Army and by Raytheon for saying it. Sit with that for a moment, because it reframes everything you just heard. The Patriot's entire reputation as a combat-proven system was founded on numbers that its own service later cut roughly in half, defending against a missile that was itself a 1950s design, which is precisely why the 2023 Kinzhal kills matter so much. Those were not claimed off gun camera footage. There was wreckage on a table photographed by Reuters with a Forensic Institute's name attached and an American general confirming the engagement. For the first time in 40 years, the Patriots' headline achievement rested on physical evidence rather than a press conference. And that is also the reason to be suspicious of every tidy intercept statistic that has come since, including the flattering ones. Because the flattering ones stopped. Somewhere across 2024 and 2025, Russia modified the Iskander M and the Kinzhal to change trajectory and maneuver in the terminal phase rather than falling along a clean ballistic arc, and to deploy decoys. The thing the Chinese analysts said it could not do, it started doing, at least crudely. If you have followed this war closely or you have seen imagery and data I have not, put it in the comments. The record on these systems is still being written, and I would rather be corrected than confident. The numbers on the other side of that change are grim, and they come from the defender's own government. The U.S. Department of Defense Lead Inspector General's quarterly report to Congress on Operation Atlantic Resolve, covering April through June 2025, and citing the Defense Intelligence Agency, stated that the Ukrainian Air Force had struggled to consistently use Patriot systems against Russian ballistic missiles because of recent Russian tactical improvements, specifically enhancements that let their missiles change trajectory and perform maneuvers instead of flying a traditional ballistic path. The same report noted a 28th of June attack in which one of 7 ballistic missiles was shot down, and a 9th of July attack in which 7 of 13 were downed or suppressed. Independent work says the same thing over a longer window. A Royal United Services Institute analysis by Sam Cranny Evans and Siddharth Kaushal, published on the 18th of November 2025 and built on a dataset assembled by the Ukrainian researcher Petro Ivanyuk and cross-checked by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, found that between September 2022 and the 24th of October 2025, Russia fired 939 Iskander and Kinzhal missiles, and 227 were intercepted. That is roughly 24%. In 273 of 345 attacks, there were no intercepts at all. In Patriot-defended areas across 2024, the rate was around 15%. And the Financial Times, on the 2nd of October 2025, using Ukrainian Air Force data compiled by the Center for Information Resilience, reported that the ballistic interception rate climbed 37% in August 2025, and then collapsed to 6% in September, despite Russia firing fewer missiles. A former Ukrainian official described the Russian upgrades as a game-changer for Russia. By the record strike of the 25th of November 2025, 22 missiles and 464 drones, Ukraine reported downing one of 4 Kinzhals, though it caught all 3 Iskander M that night. RUSI adds a caution that anyone quoting these figures should carry with them. The data is bimodal. Either most missiles in a given attack are intercepted, or none of them are. Averaging that produces a number that describes no real night and helps no real planner. And the honest cumulative totals after mid-2024 simply do not exist in public, which is worth stating plainly. After July 2024, Ukraine stopped publishing a clean Kinzhal-specific running total. Reporting shifted to per-unit all-ballistic tallies like Commander Vyacheslav Ahayev's statement on the 28th of January 2026 that the most experienced Patriot unit had destroyed nearly 250 targets, more than 140 of them ballistic. That is a different metric, measuring a different thing. Anyone who quotes you a precise current number of Kinzhals shot down is quoting something that has not been published. Russia's side of the ledger deserves the same treatment. The recurring claims that a Kinzhal destroyed a Patriot are unverified information operations, and at least once Russia caught itself doing it. In January 2025, the Russian military newspaper Krasnaya Zvezda ran a story about a Su-34 launched Kinzhal killing a Patriot, then retracted it as a gross error based on unverified information. When the state's own military paper pulls a claim, you can safely stop repeating it. So where does the duel actually land? 3 things decide it. The first is the label. The Kinzhal was never the weapon it was sold as. It is an air-launched ballistic missile, an Iskander given a running start by a MiG-31. And the word hypersonic was doing marketing work rather than engineering work. As Brookings put it in May 2023, in a piece titled around Not Believing the Hypersonic Hype, the Kinzhal is neither a hypersonic glide vehicle nor a hypersonic cruise missile. And Ukraine's ability to intercept an entire volley of 6 made the claimed status questionable at best. Putin oversold. That part is settled. The second is that the Patriot did something genuinely unprecedented anyway, and the manner of it matters. Not a claimed kill. A wreck on a table with black soot on the casing, a Forensic Institute's director standing next to it, a Reuters photographer in the room, and a Pentagon general confirming the engagement. Against a system whose fame was built on numbers its own army later halved, that is not a small thing. It is the first time the Patriot's headline achievement was something you could pick up and hold. The third factor is the one that decides the future, and it has nothing to do with either missile. It is production. Russia is estimated to build something like 40 to 50 Iskander M and around 10 Kinzhals a month. Lockheed Martin delivered a record 620 PAC-3 MSE interceptors across all of 2025, and Ukraine alone has been estimated to expend something like 60 to 70 interceptors a month, spiking toward 150 or 180 during concentrated attacks. Analysis from the Center for Strategic and International Studies estimated U.S. Patriot interceptor inventories fell from around 2,300 before the 2025 Iran war to under 1,000 afterward. That is not a technology gap. It is an arithmetic one, and arithmetic does not care which missile is more elegant. Score the Knights of May 2023, and the Patriot wins clearly. And the Kinzhals central marketing claim dies on a forensic table in Kyiv. Score the war to date, and it is a draw trending the wrong way, because Russia's engineers adapted faster than the West's factories scaled, which is where it stands now. The response to the shortage is visible in the contracts. In January 2026, Lockheed Martin signed a framework arrangement reported at up to $58.6 billion, with capacity meant to rise from roughly 600 interceptors a year toward 2,000 by around 2030. The U.S. Army placed a $441 million reorder of the older PAC-2 interceptors, the first such order in 3 decades. Because sometimes the cheap old blast fragmentation missile is the right answer to a drone or a cruise missile, and you should not be burning a hit-to-kill round on it. And on the 20th of July, 2026 at Farnborough, Lockheed unveiled the PAC-3 ACE, priced around $2.5 million, roughly half the cost of the MSE. That last one is the real news, because the deepest problem in this duel was never whether the interceptor could hit the target. It was whether you could afford to keep buying interceptors. It flew against Scuds and the numbers were a fiction. It flew against Kinzhals and the numbers were real. And now it is fighting the only enemy that has ever genuinely beaten a good weapon, which is a spreadsheet. Go back to that piece of casing on the table in Kyiv, with the black soot on it. In 2018, that missile was introduced to the world as the thing that made American missile defense obsolete. 5 years later, it was fragments, photographed for a wire service, killed by an interceptor with no warhead at all, fired by a man who used to write code. And 2 years after that, its successors were getting through again, because the other side went back to the drawing board, and the drawing board still works for everybody who uses it. The 2 books are still linked in the description. One of them is free. There is no such thing as an un-interceptable weapon. There is only a weapon that has not been shot at yet. So tell me where you land. Was the 4th of May 2023 the moment American missile defense proved itself? Or the moment we learned that the proof expires in about 18 months? Make the case in the comments. Subscribe to Combat Proven. The next system is already in the queue.